Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I need a good scare, and nothing disturbs me more than the ocean. Am I the only one, or does it scare you too?
My granda has worked offshore in various jobs his whole life. At one point he was a roustabout on an oil rig when they first discovered North Sea oil. He told me the first night he ever saw the northern lights was a week into his first trip out, and as all the men on deck were looking up, a crane cable slipped, whipped across the deck and decapitated one of his friends who was too enamored by the lights. Every time the northern lights are visible in my hometown, he will not go out, just in case.
Being a man who lives right next to the ocean and was a seasonal fisherman, I've had my share of scares out on the open water. Although, one stands out much more than the others. Be me, probably around 12 to 13. Going to our cabin in a woods across the water, since that's the only way it's accessible. Be in deep, ocean water. Only land is nearly an hour or so away from us straight ahead. Mountains are tall enough to see it though. Suddenly, ocean and water go eerily quiet and still when we stop to do a bit of open water fishing in season. No waves, no ripples, nothing. Make a quick glance over the edge while I'm pulling my line back up. See a weird creature. Looked like garbage bags underwater, pretty deep and making erratic movements, like jitters and constantly circling. Suddenly see it rise, getting much clearer. Deep red eyes, like blood red. Only its humps emerged from the water, black and scaly, a rancid, dried, decaying fish smell. A long neck, but not like Nessie long, sort of like a horse neck. It was about half the size of the boat, and just glared at me. Yell for my uncle who was with me at the time to see what the fuck this thing is. He's as freaked out as me. Not taking any chances out on the open water, we fucking hightail it out of there. Been out on the water a million times since, and not once have I seen anything close to it. Even did a bit of research online, but still never came up with concrete ideas. It still comes to my mind whenever I pass that particular spot on the way to my cabin.
Quick odd story that happened to me. Grew up in Scotland, in a town called Drumnadrochit, which happens to be on the banks of Loch Ness. The way the Ice Age carved Loch Ness is that after a few meters of shallow, 30 centimeters water, it just drops straight to the bottom, 230 meters. As kids, we used to call this the drop-off, and it was just a black mass we used to swim and push each other off. One time, during a summer swim at the drop-off, I felt something cold, large and almost metallic hit my leg. It was big enough to push me in the water and even left a bruise on my leg. As a local, this freaked me the fuck out, and I never swam past the drop again.
Can relate to that feeling. Down here in Maine, there are a lot of lakes, and admittedly there is something a little uncomfortable about swimming in said lakes. In particular, I usually snorkel, which is both cool and terrifying because one can see another world which most people don't think about, but also a lot of the lakes are very deep to the point of looking bottomless, and depending on lake visibility can be limited. In fact, once I remember seeing a very large salmon seemingly up from nowhere and then disappear into the floating sediment below. The sight was cool, but it made me feel like there could always be something in the water with me that would make me go insane if I saw it. I guess the best way to describe the lakes is Lovecraftian, because I do feel like I'm going to accidentally find a lost city that contains some elder god every time I swim.
I was in Coast Guard. 95% of search and rescue missions I went on were for missing divers. I remember one SAR, search and rescue, mission we went on was of a diver who surfaced and started waving his hands at the boat that brought them out. They said the diver was there 1 second and then he got pulled under the next second. Straight down. We never found his corpse. We never found any of the corpses for any of the SAR missions we went out on. If you go out on a boat, just know that boats sink all the fucking time for any reason. You think cruise ships are safe? They ain't. We had to respond to one that almost flipped over by mistake. For a ship ran mostly by computers, that's a huge deal. I don't go out into the ocean anymore.
Those dolphins which were being studied by biologists were doing what dolphins do. Not caring about anything and jumping around the boat. They always followed the boat in his back trip to the port. Suddenly a sailor started to feel weird. He thought it was the bad food he ate for his breakfast, and he told boat crew to return port. Dolphins started to following the boat as always, but the biologists saw they weren't jumping but marching in a single dolphin row, one at each side of boat, like a escort. In a certain moment, they stopped and overtook the boat, doing the same march thing. Then, when reaching port, they stopped and made space for the boat and stayed there waiting for it to reach the port. When the biologist and crew reached the port, male nurse of the boat told all the crew that the sick sailor was doing badly, and they even couldn't call the ambulances because he died in the boat. Dolphins knew about it. They were funeral escorting boat.
Nothing really scary in the water, but the beach itself can be pretty gruesome and scary. Mostly because people are stupid and/or bad luck. I've seen two things happen. The first one happened a few years ago. I was at the beach with friends when we just heard this guy start screaming in pain. Everyone rushes over to see this guy somehow got a horseshoe crab stinger impaled under the nail of his big toe. The thing was dead and must have washed up. He was probably running, didn't see it, and somehow ended up impaling the toe. The second was a woman who playing volleyball. They must have not evened out the sand, because she hit a pit, and broke her ankle so badly you could the bone almost sticking out from her skin. This is not really but it shows even out of the water beaches can be fucking hazards.
So, I have a few of these. One of my workmates is from Shetland. He told me a few stories about deaths and irregular events from up there. A few years back, 2016 I think, one of his fisherman friends from up there had gotten his leg caught in a netting line while out in the North Sea and had been dragged overboard. The guy had a family and would have been conscious, in agony and aware he was going to die, with no hope of rescue or escape or seeing his family again. Not particularly paranormal as such, just horrific to think about. Another one he told me about was that at the inquest to Piper Alpha there were a lot of inconsistencies that were never revealed to the inquiry. That there were two pumps, or something, that were apparently never to be used at the same time, and it was claimed in the inquest that this had never happened, but that he had photos of both being used at the same time. Something like this. I know is vague, but I don't remember the details. Anyway, he said he was holding onto them and would never go public with them in case he ended up dying in a car accident or something like that.
My grandparents in the community were sitting by a river leading to the ocean until they saw what looked like floating barrels come from the water. No noise, nothing. It was shiny, metallic, before eventually falling back into the water. They think it was either extraterrestrial or Soviet submarines. My guess is the latter, since we had tons of submarines try and come into the area. Even got the Canadian Navy on their heels one time. Either way, they went back there all the time and nothing since. A fisherman went out in quite a way from land, would sit on the boat for days, saw broom handles come out of the water before falling back in, threw in dynamite sticks and blew the water up sky high. Nothing but dead fish came up. Again, I know it has to be Soviet submarines, but damn, I don't know what it is. Creepy to be out on a boat fishing sometimes.
Warning. The following story was originally typed by someone who was not a native English speaker. I have attempted to decipher the text and turn it into something legible. Some parts will make more sense than others.
So this is a story I have told to many of my friends from the United States rather than the people from here. I don't know why. But whenever I tell someone this story, the first thing they ask me at the end of it, so was it a mermaid? Or something like that. I am from South America, Chile, and it's a pretty place full of different places, like deserts, lakes, snow, all you can imagine. Anyways, when I was 17 I won a trip, and sadly, my entire class too, to an entire week at a very pretty place called Pichilemu. To be honest, that entire week was a bit interesting to say the least. The nights, the places we visited, everything had a bit of that paranormal feeling if I had to give it a name. On the third day we went to a lake, my friend and I went to fish. My friend started to fish first, because we only rent one fishing pole. So I proceed to walk and pick up tiny crabs to eat later. I didn't because one of my friends went full PETA and told me to throw them instead of eating them, and I am studying to be chef, god damn it. Anyways, I went far away, like to the other side of the lake where I couldn't see no one. I sat on an old wooden dock, and just chilling there, and about 10 minutes later, my friend comes in a boat and gives me the fishing pole, because he wanted to do something else. I then began to fish and I was so captivated in my own thoughts and the water, that I didn't realize that someone was in the lake too. I don't know from where it came, but this lady in a white dress was all wet, and just stood there watching me for a few seconds till I had to started to talk to her. We talked about what I was doing, what I was using and all about me. To be honest, I just managed to ask her a few things before fishes started to jump out of the water and I had to catch them with whatever I could find. I then realized I didn't have anything to carry the fish back with me to the hotel, so I offered to cook her some nice fish cuisine. She agreed and we traveled to her house. It was all made of wood, and it was very big, but it also looked so old that the plants had started to take over the house, and yes, she had a garden with all sort of plants, on one side flowers, on the other side were some very interesting plants, some were poisonous, others were like potatoes or tiny trees. Inside her house, you could see she didn't cleaned it much. This was because she said that she doesn't use her house that much besides the second floor, where a room she uses for who knows what. The house, as I said, was very dirty, spider webs, dirty, old paintings that were so covered in dirt that you couldn't say it was a painting. Let me tell you that I am omitting some things to just make the story move along a bit more faster, because some parts aren't that important or I just simply think that way, but if you want to know a bit more you can ask me later. Anyways, I told her to clean the table, while I went to the kitchen, where it was quite a mess, and it was quite amazing to realize that forks, spoon and knives were all made of silver or whatever metal that was. It took me quite some time to clean the kitchen and to find a way to turn the fire on that old thing, as this damn hippie didn't want to use wood or cut a tree. I had to convince her to at least let me use dead tree wood. I made a stew with the fish and the veggies and she seemed to be quite fascinated by it, saying that she had only ate what nature had gave to her. Later on we talked a bit, and walked around the house. She didn't let me enter a room she used and then we simply sat on the sofa she had, quite a fancy one. We talked a bit more, and then she talked about her family, on how her mother hated her, because his father was a man that came one day to her mother, seduced her and simply left the next day. She would also talk about magic, and how she and her mother practiced it. Her mother also had died a long time ago and she had to make all her work. I didn't ask her about that because I was growing a bit sleepy for some reason. In fact, the more time that passed in her house, the more sleepy I would grow. I would feel heavy and I didn't even want to leave, and then it happened. She was sitting right beside me, and she would grab my arm, like hugging it, and would say that she had been so alone for a while and would like to repay me some way. Yes, she wanted my Richard, and I was all for it, but just when I was about to do it, I felt that I needed to leave for some reason, so I checked the time and it was late as fuck as my class and I all needed to leave together on a bus and I didn't know the way back and I still had this weird feeling telling me to leave, and she would tell me to stay and stuff. I fought my little Richard and I managed to leave. I left her my phone number as she seemed to have one in the house, She didn't even know how to use it though, so I told her how to use it. She didn't want to let me leave without giving me some old coins. They seem pretty different from each other. This might be because her mother would offer people to stay there for the night in exchange for money. I do believe that I have the pictures in my folders, so I will have to look for them.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.